Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. The U.S. envoy of Donald Trump said that the Gaza negotiations now stopped. We're going back to the United States, and he's threatening with alternative options. What is this new plan that Steve Witkoff is talking about, and what's going to happen exactly if the negotiations fail, if the United States decides not to continue with the negotiations? We're going to talk about this in this live stream. But before I go into the details and what this new plan is exactly and the options on the table, we're going to start off with the recent statement that came from Donald Trump. Donald Trump is clearly in line with Steve Witkoff. Now he's saying that Hamas doesn't want to make a ceasefire deal. Its leaders will be hunted down. According to the statement of Donald Trump, he said that now we're down to the final hostages, and they know what happened after you get the final hostage. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. The leaders are going to be hunted down, and he's also downplaying the recognition of a Palestinian state that's coming from France and more European countries. Now pressure is being applied on the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer as well, but Trump is saying that these things are insignificant. However, let's stop with the talks about and start with the talks about the actual plan of the United States. What are they planning exactly, and what's going to happen? Well, clearly, number one, what Donald Trump is saying, what Steve Witkoff is saying, is absolute nonsense. Why? Because they themselves were saying that there's very positive vibes from the negotiations, even hours before the statement that came from Steve Witkoff about sending the delegation back to the United States. And weeks before that, a week or two before that, Trump said we're very close to a deal. Good news coming soon. We might announce a deal within a week. We might announce a deal within 2 weeks. And the recent statement that he had before this round of pessimism and negativity coming from them, he said that very soon 10 hostages will be with us. So what happened exactly? Steve Witkoff before said that most of the problematic issues have now been resolved, and now it's down to one subject only. The Palestinian resistance, elements within the Palestinian resistance said that the United States is conducting a campaign of manipulation and deception to raise the hopes up of the people and then bring them back down. Clearly, it's evident from what's happening now. So what's the story exactly? What happened? And what are these alternative options? Well, number one, there's a catastrophe going on inside of the Gaza Strip. People are starving to death in one of the most satanic experiments in modern day history. It's as if Satan is sitting there and calculating how to make people suffer more and more and having fun while seeing them suffer. That's what the United States and Israel is doing, and anyone supporting them. Even Satan himself is ashamed. They're acting like they're God. They're acting like they can take the lives of the people. They're acting like they can choose who lives and who dies. Acting like they're God. That's what you have here. The things that are coming from the Gaza Strip, even though some people are trying to undermine them shamelessly, are beyond shocking, especially in the 21st century, and from countries constantly banging on about human rights and all of the animals' rights too. What's the story exactly? Well, to understand this better, we need to know what the Palestinian side is saying in all of this and what the mediators are saying too. And there's a very big responsibility on the mediators, like there is a very big responsibility on the Arab countries, on the Arab establishments surrounding Palestine. Because if it wasn't for their shameful position, the Palestinian side would have been in a much stronger position now. But clearly their inaction and their lame responses, let alone complicity in what Israel is doing, led or participated to us reaching the situation we're in at the moment. Of course, that's not saying all of the responsibilities on this side or on that side. At the end of the day, the genocide is being conducted by Israel and the United States and those directly supporting them. But inaction supports the aggressor. No one can deny that. And don't try and whitewash your inaction. On the borders with Gaza, there's a country. That country has a right or an obligation to allow aid in. Under international law, this genocide should have been prevented before it started. When these genocidal Zionist maniacs were even contemplating the idea of genocide, military intervention should have taken action as and when to stop these psychopaths from conducting a genocide. That's enshrined in international law, UN resolutions, giving countries the right to conduct preemptive strikes on a reckless entity threatening to commit war crimes. It's very simple. It's very basic. No one has an excuse. No country, no power has an excuse, let alone when the people are already in a genocide and are facing starvation. What are you waiting on exactly? And we will get to the talks in relation to the mediators. But the Palestinian resistance made some statements. There were statements coming out from the Palestinian negotiators who were talking in the negotiations, several statements. One of the statements came from a man called Tahir al-Noon, who is a senior figure in Hamas. He was asked to respond to the statements that are coming now from Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump about this pessimism and ending the ceasefire and what have you. He said, we find this position strange. Since the beginning, he said, we had a positive approach with the mediators, especially recently. The response from the mediators was positive. The Americans even said there is positivity, and this position is strange and is not expected. So it's like they're surprised in a way. The talks were supposed to continue next week, according to him, about the prisoners, because we haven't reached that stage yet. So it was a normal progress in the talks. How? Well, there were already declarations that Israel had some concessions in relation to the borders and what's called the Morag axis in the Rafah area. That passed well. Israel, they confirmed that they had concessions. Even media in Israel said that. Even sources in the United States too. Okay, next stage, we need to talk about the prisoners because not everything is already laid out. With every stage of the negotiations, you need to talk about certain details before you move on to implement the deal. And he said there was progress in relation to the maps, meaning that significant actions took place. So what happened? He said, we are ready to negotiate immediately. We said what we have to say. We're serious about attempts to reach a deal, stop the war, and release the prisoners. And even before the statement of Witkoff and before that statement of Trump, people were saying that there are positive talks. Another representative from the PIJ had an interview. He said, what the Israelis and the Americans want from us is basically to raise the white flag and surrender, and we will never surrender. The Palestinian resistance will never surrender. He said they want to control the livelihood of the Palestinian people for years to come. Israel is talking about even controlling education in Gaza and what people learn and who lives and who doesn't live and who's expelled and who's not expelled. And they're saying that outright. The Israeli genocide minister, Netanyahu's poodle, Israel Katz, said that this humanitarian zone that they were planning and then later provided concessions for is intended to gather all of the Palestinian people in this humanitarian city. Imagine humanitarianism in a Zionist sense. He said they will not be allowed to leave when they go in. So these people literally acting as if they're God. They want to act like they are allowed to even choose who lives and who dies and how much they eat and how many calories. Steve Witkoff was saying, oh, every Gazan will get 1,600 calories a day. Oh, how cute are you? When an average American is gulping in, what, 5, 6, 10,000 calories a day with obesity problems? Who are you to tell the people how much they can eat and how much they can't eat? What kind of world do we live in? What is this exactly? Oh, they will get 1,600 calories. Firstly, below a human average. Secondly, a malnutrition population. 90,000 children in Gaza reached malnutrition levels where they need urgent treatment. Some of them are dying every day. People are getting killed next to these concentration camps of America and Israel in Gaza, in Rafah. What is this exactly? What are we talking about? Not only that, the aid is rotting. Israel is burning aid. Look at this report here in Israel's Broadcasting Authority. IDF destroyed tens of thousands of damaged humanitarian aid items. The numerous items, they said, estimated at more than 1,000 trucks. Imagine how many people they could have fed. Included food, medical supplies, and bottled water. A military official blamed the move on the inefficiency of the distribution mechanism. It simply doesn't work. You created it. You created this system. You had an option to allow all of the aid in. You and the Americans and the American administration and forces. But Israel primarily. Instead, they went and burnt them. Imagine what we're talking about here. So, a satanic experiment, one of the worst barbaric experiments in recent history, to starve a population and watch them die of starvation, using it as a military tool against a civilian population. And, the excuse is, well, the mechanism is inefficient. The same mechanism that we started is inefficient. It's not working properly. And the thing here is, they're not outright saying it's the problem of Benjamin Netanyahu. They're saying the mechanism doesn't work. We buried everything in the ground. And we even buried some things too. Even today, there are thousands of packages waiting in the sun, and if they're not transferred to the Gaza Strip, we'll be forced to destroy them too. Of course, they're covering up their abhorrent actions anyways. Not that they're just conducting a genocide. Their rotten terrorist soldiers in Gaza are also, and have been also, proudly recording themselves burning aid in Gaza. Sickos, I'm telling you, this the level of barbarism that we're talking about here is beyond imagination. Okay. So that's in relation to the aid and how it's not working and all of the statements and the responses, which leads us to, well, what's going to happen? Well, what is the next plan then? Trump is saying, oh yeah, Hamas, and they're using the hostages, or AKA prisoners of war. There are only, by the way, IDF terrorists remaining in Gaza. There's an argument of, is there a civilian in Israel or not? Because the population is a reservist, and most of them are armed. Okay? But now these people remaining, they are from the Gaza division that the Palestinian resistance destroyed within hours, that were surrounding Gaza and making sure that the people continue to live in a concentration camp and abuse them and kill them and shoot them whenever they want, who were sniping them when they were protesting and maiming some of them and, making them disabled. But he's still saying hostages, trying to fool the people. Okay, what's going to happen? What are the alternative options? Well, do you even have an alternative option? What do you think? We're stupid? Have you not tried everything already apart from talking directly to the Palestinian resistance to try and reach a deal? Because everything else failed? What are you going to do? You landed 128,000 tons of TNT on the Gaza Strip. You genocidal, barbaric murderers. What else are you going to do? Land a nuclear bomb? Go ahead, land a nuclear bomb. What's going to happen after a nuclear bomb? You don't want to land a nuclear bomb, but if you want, that's if you want to talk about like a military force, what are you going to do? 128,000 tons of TNT on a civilian population. 8 times the size of the equivalent of the size of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. By the way, in case you forgot, it was America that used nuclear bombs against the civilian population. Only America. So if Trump's meaning of making America great again is kill 2 more million Palestinian people in Gaza Strip, making America great again, now we understand what you mean by make America great again. Murder a few more million people. That's great America for you. What are the other options? There are no other options. The only option is to talk with the Palestinian side to try and reach a deal. If there was another option, you wouldn't have spoken to them. And by the way, they tried that before. During the Biden administration and Satan of the time, Antony Blinken, and the American administration at the time, they were not talking to the Palestinian side because, we don't talk to terrorists, they'll tell you. We don't talk to terrorists. But 20 years after they were getting a beating from the Taliban in Afghanistan, they sat with them and they submitted, and they kept trillions worth of military aid, killing their people as cannon fodder for nothing, for their stupid wars that they went to after false flags and falsified information and double weapons of mass destruction. What are you going to do now? You have no other option but to talk. If there was another option, they would have already carried it out. And as a matter of fact, they've tried. They tried and they tried and they tried up until they rinsed. I mean, the Israeli army is now completely rinsed. The Israeli terror army, the Zionist army, what are they exactly? You're talking about the Air Force. Air Force with a couple of demented people on the ground. Demented people who are used to kill children, by the way, in the West Bank and whatever. No, not men or, anything normal that can. No, cowards. These people who wear diapers, they wait in their tanks, and they run away from a Palestinian, from a barefoot Palestinian who's coming to target them. What are they going to do with them? They're not going to achieve anything militarily. They tried. They don't have more force. What are they going to do? They're killing people in Gaza. They're not killing resistance fighters. The Palestinian resistance now, by the way, is having the least amount of losses per battle since the beginning of Al-Aqsa flood. Now they're going up, they're recording, they're going back safely, no harm whatsoever. And in each attack and in each ambush, they're killing way more IDF terrorists than ever before. Meaning, well, there are several meanings. Okay, number one, another American attempt with Israel to try and apply pressure on the Palestinian resistance. Number two, and you might find that a little bit strange, but I mean, nothing is strange nowadays. You're seeing what's happening. This is actually a move from the American administration to try and apply pressure on Israel. And I know you might think I'm insane or what have you, but let's wait a second. If they say we're not going to talk anymore, well, who are they talking on behalf of? Israel. They're speaking on behalf of America and Israel. Almost the same thing. If they take a step back, Israel realizes that there's no hope to reach anything. With Benjamin Netanyahu having his plans ruined in the timeline that he wants, that's also going to be problematic for Israel. That's why, by the way, as soon as Steve Witkoff made those statements in Israel, when he went back to the United States saying that we took the delegation back, in Israel, they did not say that the negotiations stopped. Usually, when there were these militaristic statements coming from the American administration, you would immediately get a response from Israel. Oh, yes, 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 let's go and let's give them hell and hell, 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 hell. I.e. the place that all of them are going to after this all ends. And by the way, I'm not, like, one thing that surprised me, how old is Donald Trump? How old is Benjamin Netanyahu? They're going to meet their fate soon. They're going to be roasting. Are they not thinking like one day ahead? What's going on there? You're going to die. Dude, you're going to die soon. You're going to meet your creator. Or be dragged immediately in an express railway to hell, directly to the pits of hell. Are you not thinking about your day after? It's as if they're living forever, you know? Anyway, they were surprised in Israel. Why were they surprised? Because clearly they weren't expecting it. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu's office immediately said, no, the negotiations didn't end. We're continuing the negotiations, and we just got our delegation back from Doha for consultations following the recent statements that came from Hamas. There were a couple of people in the Netanyahu government like Smotrich and Ben Gvir that said, oh yeah, good, America's with us again. The same imbeciles who were hailing the gates of hell of Trump before, and then later on to be disappointed by the fact that, oh no, it's not actually the hell that we were expecting. We were expecting a higher Fahrenheit or Celsius level hell, but it turned out to be a bit cooler than the hell that we expected. They were the ones who are now thriving on the statements that are coming from the American administration. Netanyahu and his office, they said, we got them back because we want to have a consultation. Therefore, this could be another trick coming from the American administration to show that, oh, listen, things might get worse. We already know, we already see what's happening. That could be an attempt from them to apply pressure so that the Palestinians can say, oh, okay, that's it, let's reach a deal. Ignoring throughout all of this time that it was Netanyahu and Israel who broke the ceasefires and refused ceasefires and went and added more conditions after they had already accepted from the Biden era to the Trump era, and they know that very well. But what can you do when you're dealing with pathological liars? No ounce of integrity and a treacherous nature. Traitors, no integrity, nothing, even in talk, no talk, nothing whatsoever. Which leads us to the mediators. Okay, we have the United States as a mediator, although the United States should be side by side with Israel in facing international law. What? The United States killed far more people than Israel. What are we talking about even? The numbers of Israel killed in relation to what the United States killed is like a small 7-Eleven versus all of Walmart and a couple of other global supermarkets. The supermarkets of genocide or the supermarkets of mass slaughter. At the end of the day, you have one way out. That way out, if you really want it, is through talks. Now, if this is an attempt against Benjamin Netanyahu, is he going to take a step back or not? That's something that we're going to see on Monday, by the way. Monday to Tuesday next week, we're supposed to get more elaboration because the rounds of talk should have been starting on Monday, which leads us back to the mediators. America is a mediator for Israel when it's, again, a participant, a direct participant in the genocide, not just an enabler. Qatar and Egypt are mediators too with the Palestinian side. Although what Qatar and Egypt are to the Palestinian side isn't what the United States is to Israel. The whole process is flawed. But it shows you the level of weakness and patheticness and complicity of the Arab regimes. Now, can't Egypt and Qatar come up with something stronger than what they have so far? Because so far we're getting reports that they're saying, oh, we're supposed to continue talks next week. We're aiming to reignite all of the talks, and hopefully we will do something, bring the sides in together. Until when? Do you think that the average Gazan can wait for one more second? These people don't have time to wait. They need immediate relief. They don't have time to wait for you and talk. Where are all of you? Children dying from starvation. They don't have time to wait for you and talk. Come out with a stronger position that will at least move something into negotiations. 1 day, 1 hour means more death. Malnutrition levels reaching a requirement of urgent treatment for over 90,000 children. We're not talking about the rest of the population. Is that the plan? To kill all of them slowly through starvation? Is that the plan? Because guess what? That's what's happening in front of all of the world's eyes. And if nothing is gonna happen immediately, then that situation is only gonna get worse. So they need to come up with a stronger position to apply pressure that would force them to come into an agreement. And where are all of the other countries and organizations involved in all of this? Are you going to wait and see children dying? The poor people of Egypt, poor population, helpless, and other, activists and what have you, filling up bottles to float, filling them up with rice and what have you, hoping to get to some of them are reaching the shores of Gaza. But of course, what is that going to do to a family of however many people? So we're reaching a pivotal moment, a very crucial moment now. Either this goes and becomes far worse, which is an indication that all of the movement, all of this global revolution against tyranny, against genocide, against neo-fascism, against supremacy will automatically escalate, or these people find a solution to tone it down. Because clearly there is no other way here. The population, humanity, any person with an ounce of decency can't allow this to happen. You can't just see people being starved, let alone your bread and butter, your blood, your people, or your brothers in humanity. That's not something that any human being can accept or should accept. Lack of action, not an option. Sitting there observing, that's not an option. And by the way, everyone must remember, and each and every one of you, by the way, that what you're doing is effective. Them, by doing all of this, by the way, they want to create a sense of helplessness in anyone standing up against this genocide and supporting humanity. They want to make the people believe that whatever it is you do, we will do whatever we want initially. and if you fall for it, they will achieve their objective. No, what you're doing is very effective. Whether it's the raising of awareness, whether it's a post, whether it's a share, a like, a statement, whatever it is, activism, protest, whatever it is, all of that must remain there and increase and double and triple and quadruple up until we end this once and forever. People can't go on like that, being starved to death, and everyone looking at that and saying, "Oh, we're helpless. We can't do anything." No. To find any way to stop this suffering. Now, in relation to what's happening on the ground, there will be a bigger clarification, especially in relation to this move from the United States that we have seen before, but now is coming at a more sensitive timing. Whether it's a genuine move coming from the United States to totally take itself out of the picture and just give Israel free reign, or as a move intended to apply pressure to make this end. And how did that happen before? Well, go back to when Trump started. Trump came, he told everyone the gates of hell will open if you don't release the hostages. Hell. And then they started to talk, and Witkoff, according to the reports at the time, forced Netanyahu to get into a deal. At the end of the day, that could be part of what's happening now. But again, that's something that will be clarified more as time goes by. But in the meantime, it is crucial that every activism continues and is escalated. Continues and is escalated because the people who we're talking about, they don't have the luxury of waiting. Every minute for them is important. Every hour, let alone a day or a week, where obese pigs will be sitting and discussing the fate of over 2 million people. The starving population don't have time for them to act like God and choose who lives and who doesn't live inside of the Gaza Strip. No one should be allowed to dictate who lives and who doesn't live on this earth. No man should have the right to do this to a civilian population. Therefore, all of the action must continue and increase and escalate up until this barbarism stops and these people get what they deserve, which is basic human rights. The main basic human rights that every person on this earth deserves, regardless of their color or skin or origin or religion. This is becoming beyond comprehension. And these are the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. And I'll open the space up for some community participation for the time left in the live stream. And any questions from our viewers. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and for participating in the chat. Aini Anwar, Palestine will be free. Jori Krancheski and Sheetster, thank you very much for your support and super. She said if there were any videos that are coming from Yemen, well, there haven't been any recent publications actually, but just confirmations of the actual actions that happened, which were 11 in total in the past week, with one Israeli attack. The recent attack that happened from Ansarullah, and thank you for asking that, because Yemen is a country that will be remembered in history. History is very important. 10, 20, 30 years from now, everything will be written. Everything will be written. Who was on the right side of history and who was on the wrong side of history. And Yemen will be written down as the most honorable country that stood up against the global superpowers and against this genocide relentlessly, punishing the child killers, forcing an embargo on them, shutting down their ports, shutting down their economy, despite the fact that it's a war-torn country with very limited capabilities and 2,000 kilometers off of occupied Palestine. Today they did this. 4 Zionist targets and also escalation options. That's Yemen. The Yemeni armed forces announced on Friday that they had targeted 4 Israeli enemy targets in the areas of Beersheba, al-Rashrash, Ashkelon, Hadera, south of Haifa, with a hypersonic missile and drones. The missile force carried out qualitative military operation targeting a sensitive target of the Zionist enemy in occupied Beersheba area with a hypersonic ballistic missile. Palestine too, stressing that the operation successfully achieved its goal thanks to God. Explained that the operation comes within the framework of defending the rights of the Palestinian people and their dear mujahideen and responding to the crime of genocide committed by the Zionist enemy against our brothers in the Gaza Strip. They also carried out 3 military operations, 3 drones, targeting 3 vital Israeli enemy targets in the areas of Rashrash, which Israel calls Eilat, Ashkelon or Asqalan, and Hadera or Khadera, south of Haifa, and that's where Israel's largest power station is. In Ashkelon, a very important strategic base and port as well. Eilat, of course, or Rashrash, its original Palestinian name, before the Zionists occupied it. It has a port that's already been shut, by the way, declared bankruptcy and discontinued its operations. So clearly, from a Yemeni perspective, as we have been used, bravery coming from Yemen, standing up against these genocidal maniacs and attacking them constantly, clearly shows you that there is capability, clearly shows you that something can be done, and clearly shows you that even if you think, or that country might think, that they have limited resources or capabilities, no, it will actually have an impact. And this impact is evident. I shared an Israeli article the other day about them confirming how they lost to Yemen. And Rise of Palestine, MahmoodOD from the flotilla, yeah, they said today, Handala of the flotilla, which is a small boat really with activists on it, today they said that they are due to reach the Gaza Strip by Sunday, unless they are, of course, taken down by the Israeli terror army, which is most likely what's going to happen. Israel did that to the previous flotilla, and they're clearly going to do that with this flotilla. JD, what do you think of just getting the children out? There is no way out. They're not allowing anyone out. You see, they're saying that, oh, we want to get the people out. They're not getting anyone out. If they wanted to get people out, they can. All of this is garbage, nonsense. Gaza has a population that is formed out of 73% refugees from where? Occupied Palestine, or what's called modern day Israel. Bring them back home. That's their home. But they don't want to do that. Why? Because they want to keep the Jewish demographic superiority. Why? Because they are an ethno-state and a Jewish supremacy. That's why. Otherwise, they would allow all of the Palestinian refugees back to their home and solve the Palestinian issue once and for all. But they don't want to do that because they are a Jewish supremacy and an ethno-state that prefers the Jewish people over other people. Simple. That's why they don't allow them out. So they're close, and that has been the case, by the way, for 17 years before the genocide started. Now 20 years. So it's not like, oh, the people want to go out. If they want to go out or whatever it is. And also there needs to be a confirmation too. If they want to go out, will they be able to be back in? You see, they're playing with the fate of the people here again in the context of acting like God. This is what they're doing here. Pure Satanism. No, sorry, Satan would be offended. Beyond, I mean, Satan wouldn't have dreamt of what these depraved Zionists do and their supporters. Gaza will stand no matter what. Don't ever lose hope, ever. Let's spread optimism and hope in place of despair. I totally agree with you. And part of the campaign that is being conducted now, and that's why I reiterate, now is the most important time to escalate, is the fact that they want these images that are coming to put the people down as part of their initial campaign. But why are they doing that altogether from the beginning? To cover up their losses and to also show the people that, listen, either you submit or you die. But that is not the nature of any honorable soul. An honorable soul that is connected to its divine creator doesn't submit to these people, to any person. And again, the effectiveness of every person who is part of this global revolution is beyond what they think. You know, you and I can sit down and think, okay, we're just doing a little bit here and there. No, it's effective. It's very important, and it needs to continue and grow, and absolutely have a more positive approach and belief. Because at the end of the day, God's will be implemented eventually, no matter how much they try and delay it, or try and play the role of, you know, we want to kill whoever we want, and we choose who lives and who dies. And they can't. They're failing even with the population themselves. Like, for example, remember what happened in January. All of the northern part of Gaza is destroyed. But the Palestinian resistance was keen on having a clause that allows people to go back to the north. And Israel tried to tamper with that and prevent it and ban it. And you know the problems that happened even during the ceasefire. With American support, they initially went back to destruction. Why? Because they faced ethnic cleansing and being expelled from their homes before, when the Zionists promised them that when the war ends, you'd be able to come back, only for them to face the reality later on and realize that they're never going to be allowed to go back to Palestine. Why? Because the Zionists occupied it. And now they're calling it a Jewish state. And only if you're Jewish, you'd be able to go back. And if you're not, you can't. That's it. Even if you have proof and evidence and whatever. So, and that's why Israel has a problem, by the way, with Gaza. Do you know why? Because in Gaza, there are the people who probably understand them the most. They know exactly what Israel is about and how it operates. And they know the treatment. So from their perspective, they want to get rid of all of the population. And again, with what they're doing now, that's why things need to escalate. People are starving. Said Mahmoud, did Yemen successfully hit the airport? I mean, we don't have a confirmation of that. So there were no images coming out to show that they did. Saying that, even if it didn't, at the end of the day, Israel shut down its airspace, delayed flights, and of course, you put in people in bunkers at the end of the day. You put in a lot of stress on the country. But there were no images like the previous one that actually landed, or at least, if there was a lot of censorship, then they wouldn't have actually published it because of the censorship. Did you see the large marches today in occupied Palestinian towns today? A person I know live streamed and the protest was large. Any thoughts on this? Yes. I mean, the Palestinian population living in occupied Palestine has always been a part of the struggle and the greater good for the Palestinian people. Recently, there has been a level of, and after a lot of struggle, of course, leniency with even some protests, because still Israel brutally attacks and imprisons people. And they prevented any sort of protests immediately after the genocide started because they implemented rules, emergency laws in place, and everyone is being imprisoned. They try and dictate how these protests are, by the way, like you wouldn't see Palestinian flags, or there would be lots of limitations, certain chants would be banned or what have you. But clearly it shows you that the tone is slightly changing and these marches are important. However, if there was real freedom for people to actually protest without government terrorism, you would have seen hundreds of thousands, not just the numbers that you saw. But again, that's clearly showing you that there is a shift even internally in relation to the protesting element, and also the fact that the streets at the end of the day will move. And Israel could face an explosion from the places it least expects, by the way, if they continue down this path. And thank you for mentioning that. And John, he's saying, greetings, Mahmoud. What's going on with Syria and Israel becoming bunk buddies? Lol. Talk about ending Lebanon and next thing, see what's the update about Hizb. Well, in Syria, there are confirmed reports coming in that there are talks to try and de-escalate between Syria and Israel. There are also reports that Syria might become a participant in what's called the Abraham Accords. However, some of the information might be exaggerated here and there. What's clearly evident now is that there are talks between the Syrian authorities and the Israeli authorities to try and de-escalate the situation. Yet despite that, Israel is still attacking in Syria. The recent attack was just over a week ago. Where does that fall exactly? And you spoke about the next thing, Lebanon, what's the situation is with Hezbollah. This is part of the greater Israel. This is part of the plan to create a greater Israel. How likely will it be it is to be implemented or not, a separate story. But that's part of their plan. The way things are going, Well, in Lebanon, they're still faced with the rock of the resistance. Why? Because although the Lebanese resistance isn't attacking Israel now, for some reason they decided that despite all of the attacks in Israel, killing some of them, and we are not going to respond now, but we might respond at some point. They haven't conceded in relation to their arms. Similar things are happening in Syria. For example, making the south of Syria a demilitarized zone. That's something that the Syrian authorities haven't accepted, having it a demilitarized. And that's why Israel still also attacks Syria. That clearly shows you that even if there is a de-escalation in Gaza and you reach a ceasefire, you're still going to be facing a problem. And that problem is an expansionist neo-colonial entity seeking to force its will on the people of the region, whether it's in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in countries that they haven't attacked in the past 2 years. And Furman, is there any way, thank you for that. You said, is there any way for us individuals to take direct action, break the siege and stop the genocide? I'm losing patience. God bless. God bless you for you. Thank you, my friend. God bless you too. Well, like I said, any sort of activism within anyone's capability is effective more than they can imagine. Now, in relation to breaking the actual siege, that requires physical action. For example, some of the flotillas that are going to the Gaza Strip, small boats, symbolic, but also that could represent something bigger that may happen. Or the aid that some people in Egypt are sending by the water, because their authorities aren't opening the borders to feed the starving population, and focused more on excuses on why they're not doing that rather than reasons for them to actually do that. If, hypothetically speaking, there's one boat going to Gaza, a civilian boat, what if 100 boats go? Let's begin with a smaller number. What if 10 boats go? Civilians. Perfectly legit journey in international waters towards Gaza, part of Palestine. Even within international law, it's not part of Israel. Therefore, they have a right to have a port. What was the Israeli excuse when they took down the Madeleine? It broke a siege that we are enforcing on Gaza. They didn't say they're reaching Israeli territory illegally. Why? Because even in international law terminology, they can't say that. Because Gaza isn't technically part of Israel. None of it is part of Israel, by the way, but we're just saying like terminology and UN and what have you. What if 10 boats go? What if 100 boats go? What if 1,000 boats go? What if 10,000 boats go? What's going to happen? There's a limit to how much force they can use. There's a limit to how many resources they're going to use. Right or not? Will that change the image globally? Mainstream and corporate media are siding with Israel in breaking against these flotillas, by the way. trying to demonize some of the activists, trying to say that they are narcissistic and what have you. Shameful. But if you're talking about large numbers, what are they going to do? So these are examples. If people are sending bottles from Egypt that have rice and they reach Gaza, what if a large ship goes off the shores and doesn't go in and releases 1 million bottles, for example, to go to Gaza or whatever it is, aid? So all of these are examples. Stephen, will Turkey act? If you ask the Turkish authorities, they are acting. They're acting how? By trying to stop what's happening. They'll tell you that we are, trying to stop and Netanyahu's Hitler and all of that. If we see the action on the ground, separate story. Why? Because even if you're going to gather all of the aid in the world, only for it to go and for Israel to burn it and not allow it in, what are you going to do? So Turkish action, if we speak about like military action, it's not going to happen. Unless Israel has an attack that Turkey considers to be an attack directly aimed at Turkey, not at Palestine. And to put things into perspective, that was when Iran attacked Israel too. When Israel attacked Iran, there's a difference between Iran and Turkey in terms of what they do. There are similarities, but there are differences. But Iran attacked when Israel attacked them, saying that Turkey is preparing for a day and preparing for a potential confrontation, whether it's going to happen in Syria or if it's going to happen directly with them. They just showed a hypersonic missile preparing for the next battles because they realized the weakness. So there is a possibility at the end of the day, the past 2 years have shown us things that were really, unimaginable before, right? Who thought we'd see what we saw in the past 2 years? But we did see them. So who knows what's going to come next? Facilitate, I think the best action we can take is to pressure politicians to shift policy on Israel through strategic mass protests. That is one of them. And that has been effective because the authorities in any country, by the way, they wouldn't have felt the need and pressure to change course and to change policy and to change statements and even to a level certain actions if it wasn't for the mass protests. That's why initially they tried to prevent them, and they are constantly on a campaign and offensive to try and prevent them and close the ring on freedom of expression and demonize action. So that has been very effective, and that was that still is, and will be one of the key elements that can apply pressure. But not only that. You have other activities such as whether it's online or media or boycott or all of that is also included. But I think, and listen, let's talk about the media for a second. Like personally, that's part of what I do. That on its own is one huge field. And the reason being is it creates the legitimacy for the actions on the ground. You know, when they tell you be careful of what you say or be careful of what you believe, why? Because that gets interpreted on the ground. Why do they not stop with their media campaigns? Why does Israel spend billions on what they call hasbara or propaganda? Because they want the people to believe that what they do is correct. On the other hand, why does the global revolution against tyranny and Zionism and oppression and neo-fascism continue every single day and move on? It's because the other side doesn't stop. That's why we have to post every day, multiple times a day, and go online and find one other thing to debunk and take down. Not to leave any excuse, because you can't leave gaps. Gaps might work for those susceptible to be manipulated. Not that, by the way, any person with, a pair of eyes and a functioning brain and, some moral compass isn't seeing everything clearly. But there's always something to do, make things even clearer. And look at the recent moves that came from, whether it's the recognition, no matter how symbolic it is, by the way, or the moves or the statements that are coming from traditional key allies of Israel. I know their statements, but Israel worries. Statements worry Israel very much. As a matter of fact, one of the senior Israeli figures was either the foreign minister or the war minister, said several months back, I covered it at the time, the American public opinion is a matter of existence for Israel. So if there is a shift in the public opinion of the United States population, there is an existential threat against the state of Israel. Do you hear me, American population? That's you. Now imagine if that's what you think. What about when, people start to move and people start to protest and people go on and things become more dangerous? For the Zionists, of course. Let's go to your next input. And John, thank you again for your input and for your super. He said, Turkey have been supporting Israel this whole time from Baku and other military close made in Turkey. Lord, they are the ones who are part of NATO, so might as well wait for Trump to save Gaza, to be honest. These 2 years have shown that the real ones, who are the true friends of Palestine. The rest, I won't hold my breath for them to do anything. At the end, Palestine will win. They can outlast Israel as they have no honor or standing. They have clearly shown, absolutely, the past 2 years, who is on their side and who isn't, and who acts and who doesn't. And Marion Thim, thank you so much, said Danke. You're welcome, my friend, from Berlin. Greetings to everyone listening from Berlin and everyone else across the world. Thank you so much for that. Janice, is it true that China flew over Gaza and dropped food supplies, etc.? No, that's not true. The ones who dropped aid were firstly, that was a long time ago when it was kind of allowed to, when they had a coordination. It was Egypt and Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. I'm not sure if France had one too, but this was circulating. I have seen no evidence to support that claim that China indeed, of course, on the diplomatic front or the attempts to stop the war, China and Chinese diplomacy is active, but the level of influence and the level of impact is clearly not to the level that is required to stop it. Like, for example, I spoke about the Hague group and their meeting that they held in Colombia. I think it was about just over a week ago, on the 15th of July, if I'm not mistaken, and how this group is planning to take more action now to make sure that international law is implemented against Israel, that Israel doesn't get away with breaching international law. China was the only superpower present in that meeting with that group, over 30 countries. And they came up with 5 to 6 key points that included direct action for banning arms, taking direct action, having this sort of attempt to enforce international law. Because listen, that's the one of the most dangerous things and one of the most devastating things as well is the fact that there is no international law enforcement. And there's a blatant hypocrisy and double standards with everything that is called international law, at least in relation to Palestine. That's why Palestine has always been the compass on where you're at on the map. Tell me what you think about this issue. So if there was an enforcement, then we wouldn't have been here. Problem is, there's no enforcement. Secondly, let alone if anything can pass. Why? Because you have permanent members in the Security Council before any enforcement. Another huge flaw of the international system. What do you mean one country can come and say no and that's it, we're over? Why? And do these countries represent an equal share of the global population? What is that exactly? Stephen Kelly of Hezbollah regrouped. Hezbollah never, dispersed anyway. Some people talk about their collapse because of their inaction or whatever. Some people, I think, don't really thoroughly read what's happening on the ground. Let me give you an example. Whether if they want to talk about Lebanon or Syria or any of the other countries too. And everyone, of course, is entitled to their own opinion. But I'll give you an example of Hezbollah. When they got huge blows, huge attacks from Israel with the pager attack or with the assassination of the Secretary General or the leading command, what happened exactly after those days? Hezbollah carried out the biggest attacks on Israel in their history. 700 attacks in one day, one of them reached. Over 300 missiles towards the central part of Israel. A drone hitting Netanyahu's bedroom window. That's what Hezbollah did after all of these attacks. And we need to understand why. It's because the group is organized in such a manner where it can continue to function as an organization independently without the need to reach back to a central command. And if we want to talk about the central command, everyone was already replaced within hours after the verification of their martyrdom. So they're there. The fact that they're strategically deciding not to participate now does not mean that they're gone. Like Iran, for example, now they're not attacking Israel. Does that mean they're incapable? Or that the whole propaganda about Israel and the United States paralyzing them? Of course not. As a matter of fact, Trump threw a rescue rope to Benjamin Netanyahu to get him out of the mud. If Iran had continued, they would have wiped them off the map. Simple. So it's not like, again, they've always continued their grouping, the fact that they are organized, and their attempts. And that's why Israel, to this day, by the way, they tell you that we are still targeting certain locations. We are still targeting people from the Lebanese resistance. Now, some people have, illusions, or, how can you explain that? I mean, some people, they have a totally defeated mentality, and they have a twisted way of thinking. So those who say, for example, any armed resistance group against Israel must disarm so that these countries can face prosperity. What happened to those who disarm? Give us an example so that we can, follow your reasoning to see if, you're more accurate. West Bank, the best example. Palestinian Authority, Oslo Accords, peace talks since 1993. What happened? There were 100,000 Zionist squatters in the West Bank. Now there are over 900,000. It was a bigger territory. It shrunk. It had no walls, and now it has walls. People get killed and sentenced to death and kidnapped every single day. Is that the example? Did Israel ever take a step back without armed resistance? No. Egypt, war. Lebanon. It was Hezbollah who liberated Lebanon. There wouldn't be a modern day Lebanon without Hezbollah. Gaza as well. And to this day, they're unable to accomplish what they want inside of the Gaza Strip because they're still being faced with constant resistance. Cupcake, what do you think of Macron's statement about recognizing a state of Palestine? I think even if it's diplomatic, even if it's symbolic, even if it doesn't really necessarily mean a lot of things on the ground immediately, even if it doesn't mean tangible results that are seen directly, anything on that front is a victory for Palestine. So more countries recognizing a Palestinian state, there would be certain implications that would be based on that. If that wasn't a case that is of any significance at all, you wouldn't have seen Israel acting frantic about it. How? There was a statement that came out from the Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who said that France, this is the response. Look at our response. What was the response? The vote in the Israeli Knesset that we spoke about a couple of days ago, vast majority, to annex the West Bank. In what was called a symbolic act of voting. However, that symbolic act of voting represented a genuine desire to annex the West Bank. As a matter of fact, the population of the West Bank, in terms of Israel and its will to have a Jewish demographic superiority across all of Palestine, is a bigger threat than Gaza. So anything on that front, diplomatic or non-diplomatic, that supports the rights of the Palestinian people is welcome and is good. However, of course, the priority is human life. The priority is saving a human life. If you save a human life, as if you saved the whole of humanity. So focus on that and any action that pushes towards that direction. Elizabeth Kainan, what do you think is the reason most countries have turned a blind eye to the genocide? Is it for economic reasons, or has Israel been gathering evidence and using it for leverage and blackmail? The second point is very crucial, because Israel has blackmailing networks, and they do use that as leverage against a lot of countries and leaders. But also, it's a state of defeat. It's a state of a totally flawed mentality. It's a state of genuine treacherous origins. Again, if there was someone who was seeing that this was coming, why don't you take action beforehand? We are people, me and you are talking. I'm talking here and you're sending me a comment and we're discussing and we're, saying, raising awareness, talking about the real truth, giving a counterpunch to the propaganda and an uppercut before it tries to come up with another propaganda. But the people who are in power, they have power in their hands to make certain decisions that can affect people's lives. That's why I'm always amazed by people who say, oh, I don't really care about politics. Oh, really? So you don't care what your children get educated, you don't care what type of healthcare you receive, you don't care about the life or death decisions that are being made against you, you don't care that your money is being stolen in form of taxation, you don't care about any of that. How can you not care about that? So these people, clearly we're talking about, in many cases, not a genuine representation of the people. And whatever the reason it is, whatever the reason, so for example, you're saying a blind eye could be for economic reasons. Some people claim that that's the reason, or leverage. Well, both of them are not good enough. Are not good enough and are not true. They're not good enough because, well, if you are in a democratic country or a country that calls itself democratic and you're not seeing the level of action required, that means that I'm going to have to cast doubt on this level of democracy and representation of the will of the people, which takes us to the original argument of what is, democracy and how was it in the Greek times, right? Original participation, directly constant referendum, seeking the public opinion, not a dictatorship that's elected following a manipulation campaign where they can take back everything that they said during that campaign and conduct U-turns, and you can be quiet for the rest of the time. They raise a lot of questions. They say a lot of questions, but some of them, there is leverage, especially in the United States, by the way. The blackmailing and all of that in the United States is huge. And the economic reasons, I just find that pathetic. It's a really poor example and very poor reason. Why? Because in essence, you're telling me that I prioritize my finances over the lives of people. Is that a good enough excuse? Or that we're incapable? Or that, oh, when we're capable, we'll do something. And by the way, every single claim of that, the people say, well, finances, oh, we're weak, we can't. Every day it's being debunked in Gaza by the heroism of the Palestinian people. Every day that's being debunked in Yemen by the heroism of the Yemeni people too. So that shows you exactly where they stand. And again, whatever the excuse is, it's not really good enough. And thanks again, everyone, for your participation. Of course, apologies, I'm unable to reach all of the comments, but we'll, of course, try and reach as much as possible. And if you're not highlighting them, please do, so that we can address them. Wavy McFly, do you think we're eventually headed for war between Russia, Iran, and the global South versus the United States, Israel, and the West? Well, I think what is being called the global South, or the BRICS nations, or the East, in a way, and that is no justification for inaction or anything, are seeing the empire crumble from within. The British Empire collapsed after it reached levels of heap arrogance and thought, there's no progress to be done. The American Empire is collapsing after, again, heaps of ignorance and arrogance too, and being in a state of in denial. The conflict that we're seeing in Palestine is the ultimate representation of that big battle. That battle between the empire and the rising nations. Will it necessarily lead to an all-out war? Not necessarily. But don't we already have a war? What Russia's doing in Ukraine and the support that Ukraine is getting isn't just a Russian-Ukrainian thing. That's, in a way, a war between Russia and the United States. China, you see the level of hostility. You see the trade wars that are happening, the looming threat of Taiwan, the constant provocation of the United States in the South China Sea. Iran, we already saw a mini war happening. So it could reach a stage where it goes to an all-out war, but there would be many calculations included. Because what is war eventually? War is the means to achieve political gain when all of the diplomatic efforts failed. Unless you're talking about Israel, where it has it the opposite way. Because it's a genocidal entity. So if these countries view that the space of diplomacy is still more open for them to get the political requirements or financial development that they want or progress for them as a nation, without resulting to, then why should they go to war? War is a hideous, disgusting thing, by the way. And if you look at the past century, it has always been pushed by Western countries, primarily. The United States, over 80 wars in the past century, and all of them are aggressive wars based on greed, nothing justified. And the fact that they brainwashed people to justify them doesn't make them justified, by the way. That means they were justified in the brains of brainwashed people, in the heads of brainwashed people. But other nations simply want to be left alone. The United States isn't leaving people to, they're not like live and let live everywhere to protect the trade route, and we want to get that, and we need to get these precious metals from, and they can't have a challenge for us in Africa, and if we take a step back, they're going to take the whole world. That's not the case. However, if you take an example of China, Western colonialism failed miserably in Africa. French bases, American bases being removed. Who are these countries being aligned with now? Who are they allied with? They're allied with China, they're allied with Russia. Why? Because they don't have the arrogant colonialist supremacist mentality with them. And because they actually work hand in hand with them. China, several years back, they wrote off a $50 billion debt from African nations. Now you won't come and tell me, oh, but there were also demands coming from the other side and development. They agreed upon developmental plans and they continued to go ahead. They didn't go as a master to a slave, unlike Western colonialist countries, and not just in Africa, of course. So the Chinese, in that example, are progressing without having a direct war. But at the same time, they are expanding their army. Why? Because they know that this world isn't run on morals or principles or ethics. It's run by power. Power dictates it. So that's why they constantly get stronger and stronger. And so long as the American militaristic oligarchy continues, that's how the other countries will be operating to protect themselves from the American militaristic oligarchy that can come and bash them at any point with any excuse to impose its will on them. They're going to have to protect themselves. Is there another way? Yes, there is another way. Is there a capacity to reach to, solutions diplomatically? Absolutely. It's within human capability to completely ditch the whole idea of war, which is a disgusting thing, by the way. But of course, when someone imposes it on you, you need to defend yourself. However, based on what's been happening in the past couple of years, well, 3 to 4 years in particular, there's a big danger that things could absolutely escalate. And Free, thank you for your super, much appreciated. Okay, guys, we'll wrap it up there then. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream. Thanks for everyone who participated in the chat. Everyone who sent supers, Free, John, Marion, Furman, Jory, Sheedster, Palestine, and Aini, and everyone who participated in the chat. Of course, apologies if I didn't reach all of your contributions, but I do appreciate all of your input. I might have segments for you. If not, I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow with either another live stream or a video. In the meantime, have a peaceful rest of the weekend, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.